Yeah, I forget what Washington did on the Potomac. This is the Potomac. Black folks would sometimes refer to that as the Potomac, you see, but this is the Potomac. Saw a duck floating out there a little while ago. Somebody said, yeah, but Reagan is in charge. We're all ducks, dead ducks, you dig it? Symbols of democracy are pinned against the coast. The outhouse of bureaucracy surrounded by a moat. Citizens of poverty are barely out of sight. The overlords escape near evening, the brothers on the night. Morning come and bring the tourists straining rubbernecks. Perhaps a glimpse of the cowboy making the world a new respect. It's a massive irony for all the world to see. It's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. It's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital. It's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. Did a poem called Painted Black, because people used to ask me what the difference was between Jackson, Tennessee and New York City, and I'd say about 500-600 miles. Truth was, it went a whole lot deeper than that. And the description of the poem went something like this. Picture a man of nearly 30 who appears twice as old with clothes torn and dirty. Give him a job shining shoes or cleaning out toilets with bus station crews. Give him 6 children with nothing to eat and expose them to life on a ghetto street. Tie an old rag around his wife's head and have her pregnant, lying in bed. Stuff all 8 of these people in a D.C. house and then tell them how bad things are down south. I was painted black. It may not have the glitter or the glamour of L.A. It may not have the history or the intrigue of Bombay. But when it comes to making music instead of making news, or people who just don't make sense and people making do, seems a mass of contradictions pulling different ways between who have come and go and the ones who got to stay. It's a massive irony for all the world to see. It's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. It's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. Of course, this poetry was always put down as street poetry because, of course, that's where the people were. People were on the street, and these were the people that you wanted to communicate with. Did an idea one time about how often it is that folks brother and sister one another, and how rare it is that something actually comes out of that people can grasp onto. Did a poem about the fact that oftentimes the people who are doing the most talking and the kind of conversations that you run into around this neighborhood should be the ones doing the most listening. The poem we did was called Billy Green is Dead. The economy is in an uproar. The whole damn country is in the red. The taxi fares is going up. What? You say Billy Green is dead. The government can't decide on busing, or at least that's what they said. Yeah, I heard you when you told me. You said that Billy Green was dead. But let me tell you about these hot pants that this big leg sister wore when I was partying the other night. What you say? Billy took an overdose. Well, now, junkies will be junkies, but did you see Gunsmoke last night? Man, they had themselves a shootout and folks was dying left and right. At the end, when Matt was cornered, I had damn near give up hope. Why you keep on interrupting me? You say my son is taking dope. Well, then call the law and call the doctor. What you mean I shouldn't scream? My only son is on narcotics. Should I stand here like I'm pleased? Is that familiar, anybody? Check out what's inside your head, you see. Never seems to matter when it's Billy Green who's dead. Whether you're on a tour of Washington, let me tell you, those tours are always the same. They bring you around to places like this. They might even tell you who the jackass is on the horse or the guy up on top of the building, but they never show you the real Washington. You should have been around maybe the 15th of January. That's when Stevie Wonder was holding this rally. It was about 50,000 people gathered there. They were trying to demonstrate and make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. But it's always the same. The Capitol, the Hoover Building. Maybe sometimes they would even show you the Washington Monument. But that's not a look at the real Washington. The one I'd like to show you is something special. You want to see what's happening in the nation's capital? Come with me. You see, most of the things that happen in the nation's capital happen in neighborhoods just like this. And unfortunately, these are the neighborhoods that the people from Omaha and the people from Kansas and the people from out in Indiana and Ohio never get a chance to see. So when there are protests and demonstrations and expressions of concern by members of communities like this, people in the Midwest and other places who've been to the nation's capital, they say, why, those people in D.C., they're living so good, they have it so great, what could they possibly be demonstrating about? It's because the tourmobile takes you to Georgetown. The tourmobile takes you to the Gold Coast. Tourmobile never comes down to 10th and V, 10th and W. Tourmobile never gets over here into the heart of the city, and therefore never has any real contact with the people who are the lifeblood of this city. Seems to me, spent a lifetime, late one night, up on 14th Street. Made me feel always the right time, 'cause the people should not be loving me. Didn't make but one, second to none. See, it's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. There are some ghosts of America's past, naturally. People who have been building blocks to the history of this country, and we haven't seen very much of them so far on our tour. But believe you me, as soon as we take a turn around another one or two of these corners, I'm going to take you to a place where all of them are still, well, I couldn't say alive and well, because even when they're alive, a lot of them wasn't doing that well. But at the very least, I can say that we can show you some of the symbols of the things that we consider when we talk about the history of this particular nation. Come on, let's go. Yeah, they told me this would be quite a surprise, because things have changed here over the last 2 centuries. It seems as though things have gone even a little bit further than from Plymouth Rock to Acid Rock. You know, there are lots of pieces of American history here. Betsy Ross, I suppose, dealing with the flag. I once heard a suite one time that was written by a guy whose idea was called, "How Much Nicer It Might Have Been If Plymouth Rock Had Landed on the Pilgrims." Well, I don't know if I agree with all that, but there are certain indications of a long past America here. The clock, the photographs, the ships. But what I really wanted to talk about was something of a new nature, at least in terms of our perspectives of ourselves. Take, for example, this guy standing over here in the corner. A lot of us will recognize him. Did a poem one time called The Watergate Blues. And in the Watergate Blues, hey, straighten it up over here. In the Watergate Blues, one of the big lines that we delivered was that if Nixon knew, Ag knew. Question was, who was around where Hale Boggs died, and what was the cause of LBJ's untimely demise? And what really happened to J. Edgar Hoover? The king is proud of Patrick Gray, while America's faith is drowning beneath a cesspool called the Watergate. The candle was passed on from Nixon to Oatmeal Man, you see. As a matter of fact, when Oatmeal Man inherited the presidency some few years ago, well, matter of fact, he looks a little bit more on the job now than he did while he was president. Spent a brief time in the White House and then passed it on to Skippy, who was the victim, or at least the guy who came in second in the last election, collecting 21% of the registered votes. It's a massive irony for all the world to see. It's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. It's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. It's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's the nation's capital, it's Washington, D.C. A lot of people may well see this particular gentleman as someone who makes an appearance either in a supporting or non-supporting role in many of the poems that I do. The truth is that the politics that we discuss are not partisan politics in terms of Democrat or Republican. I am a member of the Common Sense Party. And for the longest kind of a time, I have felt as though people who said that they did not care anything about politics or were not interested in it were making a political statement in and of itself. The new poetry that evolved in our society concerned the fact that folks wanted to use both words that people could understand as well as talk about ideas that people could understand. One such poem, at least an early poem of ours that went in that direction, concerned the fact that millions and millions of dollars are continually sent into outer space while we continue to face the same problems here on the ground. Poem said, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon, and her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon. You know, the man just upped my rent last night, 'cause Whitey's on the moon. No hot water, no toilets, and no lights, but Whitey's on the moon. I wonder why he's upping me, 'cause Whitey's on the moon. I was already giving him $50 a week, and now Whitey's on the moon. Taxes taking my whole damn check. The junkies make me a nervous wreck. The price of food is going up. And as if all that crap wasn't enough, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. Was all that money I made last year for Whitey on the moon? How come I ain't got no money here? Whitey's on the moon. You know, I just about had my fill of Whitey on the moon. I think I'll send these doctor bills, air mail special, to Whitey on the moon. See, my office used to be right down here on the corner of 9th and W. And when I would tell people I was at 9th and W, they'd say, man, ain't that a rough neighborhood? I said, yeah, it is pretty rough. But it ain't as rough as 11th and W, and it ain't even as rough as 16th and Pennsylvania. But I feel like the people who got to live over there, they really in trouble. Everybody gets to look at the White House when they come to Washington, D.C. But this is a part of what goes on out in front of the White House that very few people ever get a chance to take a look at. Across the street, they're demonstrating for world peace. Over here, you have different signs that have been sentenced to the star of our B movie, asking them about justice and freedom and equality. You know, the protests that are launched in this country are not launched necessarily against the government. They're launched in terms of the fact that this country has rarely lived up to its advanced publicity. This is supposed to be the land of justice, liberty, and equality, and that's what everybody over here is looking for. Morning come and bring the tourists, painting rubbernecks. Perhaps a glimpse of the cowboy making the world a nervous wreck. You know, the question is not actually who the baddest hombre is in these parts, because I think I'm the one. But it has a lot to do with the difference between the Old West and the New West and the way it is perceived. Because you see, there are a lot of folks in America who are refusing to recognize the fact that today is actually today. Times have changed, but very few folks in America have. Nobody is the president. We got somebody over there who's acting like one, but to this point here, what we believe is that nobody actually is in charge. Ready to go?